This episode of Trifles is made possible by listeners like you who support us on Patreon and Substack. To learn more, go to patreon.com/trifles or trifles.substack.com.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the beaches were copper, the pince-nez was golden, and the blaze was silver, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever stopped to wonder about the difference between Holmes's pipes? Or how often he smoked cigars versus cigarettes? Or what Egyptian cigarettes are like?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 400, The Great 400. Hello and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we get into the minutiae in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And Burt, you sound great.
Great. Thank you, Thurl.
Yes, well, we're going to get right to this. There's no mincing about it. We are in the midst of our 400th episode.
Oh, goodness.
It's astounding that we did this. I never thought we'd make it.
Happy 400th anniversary. Wow. That's 10, isn't that the 10? Don't I give you like a gum wrapper or something?
I will take whatever you want to give me. I'm that desperate. Desperate for your approval, for your ratings, all of that, yes. Well, what we thought we would do in this episode, and we bandied about some ideas in the last episode, but we thought we might look back over the previous episodes and pick our favorites, much like Arthur Conan Doyle did when he was getting ready to publish the casebook of Sherlock Holmes, that final collection of short stories. He asked readers to write in with their list of favorite stories. He had made up his list of 12 favorite stories, and the promise was those readers who matched his list story for story in the right order would get, I believe it was the Crowborough edition of his collected works.
Oh, that's a handsome present.
It is. Does that ring a bell for you? Or?
Well, I remember the competition.
You participated?
No, I've read about it, but I don't remember the prize. But if the Crowborough edition was the prize, that's a very generous prize. I hope a devoted reader won it.
Yeah, I think somebody did. So, no Crowborough edition here, but we will share with you the gift of our insights of our favorite episodes. Well, before we get to that, I just wanted to remind you that you can support the show by going to patreon.com/trifles or trifles.substack.com. We have links to both of those locations in the show notes. Of course, whatever software you are using to listen to us, it is on a platform that has the show notes available. So check those out. You can support us for as little as $1 a month, and it helps us keep these ideas flowing, keep the prizes flowing at the end of every month for our listeners. Because this is a special episode and it is at the end of the month, we're going to skip the prize this episode. We'll pick it up next episode, but we will get directly to our show because we have a number of previous episodes to mention. We want to make sure we get to all of them in a timely fashion. So, Burt, I thought we would take this in chronological order, in numerical order. And you have selected some episodes that are the earliest. So let's hear about it. Let's hear what they are and why you chose them.
Yes, I will. But the first thing I do want to do is just add to your remarks about support and so on. Friends, this is our 400th episode, and what we would like you to do is to help us reach 400 reviews of our podcast. And so if you could please give us a review, just your own honest review about the show, use words like restored my will to live, gives me renewed faith in the future of mankind, things like that. But wherever you are on your podcast platform, if you scroll down when you're looking at one of our episodes there, you will find that little rating window there, and we would be very grateful. We want to get to 400 ratings for Trifles. But 400 episodes. I picked a series of favorite shows that, to me, reflect at least my own personal view of what Trifles is all about at its best. And so back to 2017, that year, 3 shows stood out for me. Number 4, number 7, and number 30. Number 4 was Guilt in the Abbey Grange. It was a review of alternate possibilities and villains behind a story. And bringing that sort of perspective to life, I think, is something that we very much wanted to do in Trifles, almost echoing articles in the Baker Street Journal and Sherlockian Scholarship. Number 7 was John, James, and Mary. It was a great review of all the scholarship. H.W. Bell, Dorothy Sayers, Christopher Morley, Blakeney, Bliss Austin. And then number 30, and about, that was based on the incident where Mary Watson says to her friend, her visitor, should I send James to bed? What's all that about? And then number 30, A Lengthy Treaty, a deep dive into the naval treaty, the longest and one of the best stories. And I thought that was a really nice discussion.
Yeah, I think those really kick things off, as we did entirely in the first season there, kick things off in a way that gave people a good sense as to what we were trying to do. Have some of these discussions like we do at Sherlockian events. If you've never had an opportunity to go to a Sherlockian Society event, a lot of times there will be a story as part of the discussion, and you can do a summary of the story, but you can also kind of hammer out, well, what did certain things mean? What was a naval treaty? Why were we interested in nepotism and bullying and carelessness? Some of the subjects that we come across in the naval treaty really gave us a great opportunity to explore that with you. Yeah. And friends, you will hear a decidedly smaller number of selections from me because, well, I followed the instructions. I followed the assignment. Yeah, Bert, in his typical mode, was overly enthusiastic about this and over-delivered, as he always does. So we are grateful for that. But I mailed it in. I gave you the bare minimum.
You did.
So I went all the way to the end of season 1 to episode 51. Now, this was an episode, I think it arrived just before Christmas. And the topic was peace in the canon. And it struck me that this was different because we looked at, it was almost like looking at the dog in the nighttime. We thought, well, if you find glimpses of peaceful moments, things where all is right with the world, this occasionally happens, but what a wonderful opportunity to pause on that and reflect on the happiness rather than the angst, the peace rather than the conflict that we find in the Sherlock Holmes stories. And I just thought it was a wonderful way to wrap up that first year.
Yeah, well, no, exactly right. Well, I'm going to get on my skates here and just flip through a couple of these to get up to your next one, which I think is a very good selection. But in 2018, Episode 59, Inside 221B, What's on the Wall? General Gordon and so on. And that whole series, The Walls of 221B Baker Street, because that setting is so important to all of us, I thought was just great. Number 75, Numi and Arca, dealing with, the financial side of Baker Street, exactly what Holmes's income was, all of those kinds of details, currency in Victorian England, things like that. Number 101, You're So Handsome, cabs, dog carts, etc., transportation. It's one of our earliest shows about that sort of thing. And then in 2019, 110, governesses, all of the governesses in the canon. Boy, those women keep popping up. Villains, number 113. Our deep dive into Grimsby Roylott kicked off what I thought was a great series. And then I'll just jump a little ahead at the end of 2019, number 152, Hats. I just couldn't resist the show on hats in the canon. Friends, where else are you going to find a discussion of headgear in the Sherlock Holmes? Only here.
Well, and that was nice, too, because you and I have a fondness for hats. So it was one of these things where our personal interests intersect with the Trifles topic. And it wasn't just the standard, here's a bowler, here's a deerstalker. We talked about billycocks and Scotch bonnets and sombreros and curly-brimmed hats and Panama hats and, Watson keeping his stethoscope in his hat. And it was really something and worth listening to once again. It is worth pausing and noting in season 2, you mentioned Inside 221B. This was our first instance of creating a recurring series in the show. So every month we did something that was from the setting that we all know so well, Inside 221B Baker Street, whether it was what was on the walls or looking at Holmes's chemistry set or the wax bust or his Morocco case or the Stradivarius, lots of great topics on Inside 221B. And we also had a recurring theme in that season with unpublished cases, where we looked at some of the very famous cases that Watson mentioned but didn't expound upon. So those are well worth getting into as well. So the episode I chose, it's actually a pair of episodes, but it's a part 1, part 2 from this century, the 100 to 200 episodes, was John Watson's youth, parts 1 and 2. And the reason I chose that is because we had something very unusual. We had a special guest. Do you remember who joined us for those 2 episodes, Bert?
Robert S. Katz.
Dr.
Ainstree of the BSI.
That's right. So he talked about where Watson was when he was a young man, how he traveled to Australia for a while and then ended up in Pennsylvania and was actually part of the United States Civil War. It was part of his scholarship and creating, I think, a wonderfully convincing explanation for John Watson's background. So it was a real live demonstration about some of these scholarship topics that we talk about on a regular basis.
Oh yeah, very good. Well, yeah, I like that very much. It was great to spend some time with Bob.
Always.
Well, 2020 brought 3 great episodes, I thought. And looking back on it, number 160, Army Coaches. And the reason why that stood out for me was it's one of the many subjects about which I knew nothing. And it was revelatory to me to find out, because, of course, Professor Moriarty is identified as having been an Army coach, among other things. But that opened up that whole little world, which I found interesting. 174, Colonels and their contributions in the canon. 183, Justice, so central to the life and work of Sherlock Holmes. I thought that discussion was very appropriate. Then 2021 brought 232, the best Sherlock Holmes stories. And that gave us a chance to visit our own personal views, but also, as you pointed out earlier, to revisit Conan Doyle's own selection. Episode 237 and 239, the evolution of Sherlock Holmes, how the character has evolved, how his personality has changed over the years. And then in 2021 at the end, 258, Street Lamps by Nick Utekin, just a masterful work of scholarship and one of Nick's many contributions to Sherlockiana.
Indeed. And my selection came right within the orbit of one of yours. You mentioned 232, the best Sherlock Holmes stories. I chose episode 231. This is where we turned to you, our listeners. You wrote in. You asked us some questions. It was kind of like an advice column for Sherlockians. You wanted to know, well, what? I don't remember the exact questions. I don't have the transcript in front of me, but it's well worth going back and hearing about the things that you asked about that wouldn't have been, that there wasn't enough fodder to give us an entire episode on any one of these questions, but they served well in that type of format where you wrote in and we gave some explanation.
Yes, and let's do it again. You know, if you've got more questions, things you'd like to know about the show or the Sherlockian world or Conan Doyle, whatever it is, my shoe size, just send us an email. And we'd like to compile them if there are enough of them and answer. Make sure your questions are answered.
That's a great suggestion. The email address, which we do have in the show notes, but we'll give it to you here while you're listening, is trifles@ihearofsherlock.com. Again, trifles@ihearofsherlock.com.
Yeah, and put questions in the subject line.
Yes.
Well, rounding out my selections, 268, another Nick Utekin masterpiece, I thought. The Politician, The Lighthouse, The Trained Cormorant, another fabulous bit of scholarship. Master's Class, 281, Tupper Bigelow, Hoof Marks in the Priory School.
Yeah,
and there's another series that we did, the Master's Class series, where we looked at work by Christopher Morley and Michael Harrison and other people. And I just thought that was beautiful.
Yeah,
and it was wonderful to revisit that work.
I do want to credit you with that entire series because we had been doing, I think it was following Bob Katz's appearance, we did some scholarship. We called those topics Mr. Sherlock Holmes the Theorist, where we took a piece of old scholarship and resurfaced it. But I think the brilliance of your idea, Bert, was to take some of these classics, these really wonderfully demonstrative pieces of scholarship that show how Sherlockians can shine when they really put the effort in and create a really nice piece of analysis or scholarship or just have fun with the stories.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I hope it's a good example to people. We'd really like to get more people participating. And then 297 in 2022, 297 was all about the Arcadia mixture. And that's another favorite topic of mine, the tobacco smoked by Holmes and what its roots were and the connection to James Barrie and other literature of the day. You know, it's one of these little arcane things. And then finally, 2023, number 334, episode 334, The Great Hiatus by Edgar Smith. And here we are again reviewing some great scholarship by noted names from the past. Edgar, of course, wrote that Holmes wasn't in Tibet at all during the Great Hiatus. He was in America. The very idea. 340, Dining with Sherlock Holmes, a terrific subject. And we had to get in deep into the cuisine of the world of Sherlock Holmes. And then last, our old friend Michael Harrison, number 346, episode 346, The Ripper and the Crown. Michael, who devoted so much time in his own writing to the story of Jack the Ripper and possible explanations. It was really, I just very much enjoyed revisiting that work. And so those were, out of 400 episodes, those, I think, are about 21 that that loomed large for me to use it.
Well, and I should note that 346 is actually Why Didn't I Check Montague Street, which is also by Michael Harrison.
Oh, oops.
The Ripper and the Crown is 351.
Oh, dear,
So
oh, dear.
we'll let you have that.
Well, thank you.
You can have both of them if you want.
My era. Well, I liked Why Didn't I Check Montague Street, but I think of the two of them, The Ripper and the Crown, I thought was really first.
Jack the Ripper and Sherlock Holmes coming together. It's long been a kind of a dream of Sherlockians, and people have wondered, why Jack the Ripper wasn't caught by Sherlock Holmes. So
yes, not too many people know the real story, which of course is that it was Mrs. Hudson who. But I'm not going to spoil anyone's enjoyment.
I know, forget it. But I should also note that season 7, we did a recurring theme, not only with the master's class, which you just heard there, but we also did a national blank month. We took inspiration from these calendars where, for example, January was mentoring month, and February was wedding month, and March was sleep awareness month, et cetera, et cetera. And we picked topics that related to whatever month celebration was going on. So those were all excellent suggestions, and I think where is the one that I chose from? The episode 349 was my selection from that season, and it was Suicide Prevention Month. And we talked about suicide in the Sherlock Holmes stories, and I'm very proud of this episode because we talked about actual suicides, attempted suicides, assumed suicides, and ruled out suicides. And I think we did it in a way that was sensitive to the topic, recognizing that this could be a particularly personal issue for some people for whom suicide may have affected their lives. And we didn't want to cause any angst or undue emotion about this, but we did want to cover it as something realistic, something that was part of the Sherlock Holmes canon. And we got a lot of good feedback on that episode, and it remains one of the episodes I'm very proud of.
Oh, you should be. That's a great choice.
So all told, I think that's about 25 episodes. And I think what I will do is, just to make this easy, is I will put a playlist together on SoundCloud, so you can find that. You can also find these recurring themes, the months, the Inside 221B, the Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the Theorist, etc. We have those in playlists as well. But I will put those together on SoundCloud. I will put them together for our Substack supporters and for our Patreon supporters. So look for those kind of all bundled in one area so you can find them as well. But there's no reason you can't go back and listen to these Trifles episodes in sum. You're going to need to catch up with us at some point. So round the block, start at episode 1 and enjoy it all over again. And that will be no trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
I really must congratulate you on your attention to detail. There are a few trifling points which might perhaps be added.